KLTV sound check, KLTV sound check.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday morning meeting of the BOCC. We'll start with the flag salute. If you want to rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, as usual, I'd ask Commissioner Mortensen to review the minutes for us.
And as usual, I will reply that I have reviewed the minutes of the activities of last week and I move to approve those minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Any questions, comments on the minutes? See none, see no hands. I would call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Consent agenda. I'll try and run down through this. Under agreements, contracts, bid awards. We have an agreement with Debt Book, or we're going into agreement with Debt Book to properly track and record all county subscription-based information arrangements. This law takes effect January 1st, 2024, requiring us to track that. We estimate, I think our auditor's office looked at the agreements we have, and we're right in the neighborhood of 75 to 100 agreements that we would have to track. And this software at a cost of $16,230 would be more efficient to use than it would be manual hours of a person to keep track of that. So that's what that is. We have a 3-year extension, or it's a renewal of our Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. And you can see that stuff isn't cheap, $340,521. We have some resolutions on here. Budget season, we got a resolution to adopt the Consolidated Diking Improvement District number 2's budget. That's been to us before. They get those things to us. It's been looked over. Resolution to dissolve Treasurer's Adjustment Fund. It's a fund that the treasurer no longer uses, so we no longer have a need for it. Resolution authorizing defeasance of all the county's outstanding special sewer revenue refunding bonds, providing for and authorizing the purchase of certain obligations for, what this is, in fact, maybe I'll have you come up and explain it because you're from you do a better job than I would. Yeah. It just, there should be a button and you'll get a bright green light on the mic.
There you go.
Yeah, and you just keep it kind of close. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dwayne Leaf. I'm the general manager of Three Rivers Regional Wastewater Authority. This resolution is being requested on behalf of Three Rivers Wastewater because we are doing a very large project. And because we are now a joint municipal services agency, we can do bonding ourselves. Whereas in the past, we had to do bonding through the county, which is what these bonds that we're asking to be defeased are about. We have assembled a team of a bond counsel team. They have advised us that it's in Three Rivers' best interest to pay off the county bonds early, because that makes the bonding effort on Three Rivers less complicated because it will not involve the county. Otherwise, you would have to be part of the bonding process, and I don't think you probably really want to do that either.
Yeah.
So that's really what the purpose of this is. The project we're embarking on is a combination of a biosolids improvement project, and we have two primary clarifiers at the plant that are failing, and we need to replace those. The project is going to be around $50 million, but about half of that will be paid for by revenue that we'll be bringing in as a result of the solids handling project, plus a bunch of cost savings that are associated with that. So really, out of a $50 million project, we only are raising rates for the 24 million, and we have that projected out, and that's actually going to be discussed tomorrow at a special board meeting of the Board of Directors, of which Cowlitz County is part of that. And then it'll be discussed during the budget time and make sure everyone's on board with the project.
Okay.
So any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
They're paying these bonds off, but they're over a 2-year period, so you can't just pay off. So it's being held in trust.
Correct.
And then as those come due, our treasurer will pay those off. So that's what this whole thing does.
Correct.
So you did mention you'd be raising rates to cover a portion of the project,
Yes.
but those rates are to the 3 member entities that
Actually,
deliver product to your plant.
yeah, actually, there's 4.
Four.
There's Cowlitz County is about 2% of our flow. Kelso is about 30% of the flow. The Beacon Hill Water and Sewer District is about 8% of the flow, and Longview is about 60% of the flow.
Yeah.
So most of this project, because it's done by flow splitting, is actually borne by Longview. So the county's portion of this is really pretty small.
So then the city councils and the commissioners of the 2 other entities incorporate the rate increases into what they send to
Correct.
the
And
customers.
yes, and we're working on that budget now. My goal, we have averaged at Three Rivers about a 1.5% rate increase over my 18-year tenure there. So this will be one of the largest rate increases we've had, but right now I'm projecting about a 6%. And then going forward, every 2 years, we'll be raising rates by less than 1% for this part of the project. That doesn't mean the budget won't go up more than that, because I can't predict, that far out, but the actual project itself is not going to cause that much of a rate increase.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other things we have on consent agenda, some letters, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We get letters from them quite frequently. A letter to Ann Rivers regarding the application to Solid Waste Advisory Committee. We had already filled that position and we were letting her know that. And then a retirement letter to Patty Curo at put in 21 years of service with the county. And then vouchers in the amount of $6,947,690.74. Any other questions, comments on the consent agenda?
Just a question on
Yep.
the very first item. What kind of agreements? We've got hundreds of agreements, I'm sure. So what kind of agreements in the software?
I just looked through the letter on it and it said there's like 400 software applications and the auditor was estimating we had.
There we go. This was an invitation for the auditor.
Okay.
Good morning. So the auditor's office does have a software request before you today, and it might be a little muddy because we did originally submit this as a technology request in our 24-25 biennial budget. My team's already been working with IT on this, but we were offered a one-time early adoption discount that we thought it would be in the best interest of the county to take advantage of. So I'm going to give just a really quick history on what this is, and I'll turn it over to my trusted accountant to give you the details. You may remember that we just implemented the reporting requirements of GASB 87, which was leases. So all entities are required to report now all financial leases. That could be anything as simple as a copy machine lease. So we have hundreds of them across the county. And we acquired a software that enables us to do that, to contain that information and then report it on our annual financial reports. That software was called Gravity. But beginning January 1, we're required to implement now the requirements of GASB 96, which is software leases. So you may hear this acronym SPITA, S-B-I-T-A, which is a fancy acronym for now reporting all software leases. That could be anything as small as your digital TDN subscription Elections has subscriptions to drafting software like Adobe InDesign for local voter pamphlets. So all those different digital subscriptions across county departments, we have to now track and report on our annual financial report. So the software request before you today is actually a consolidation request. We currently have a software solution that we pay $5,405 annually for. We would like to eliminate that and move to DebtBook with an annual cost of $16,230 to account for both leases and SPEDAs. So I know that DebtBook offered us an early adoption discount of $5,000. They waived all of the implementation fees for us. So that's why we kind of moved quickly to get it on your agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee and Camilla for details and any questions that you guys might have.
So I do have a question. Did you want to go ahead?
I was just going to say Carolyn covered a really good portion of it, so I was just going to let you guys ask any specific questions that you had.
Excellent. We're on the same page. The this is a standalone software package, right?
Yes.
Effectively, it may be here or it may be out in the cloud. Do you have any requirements for interfacing that to anything else in the county?
There are no requirements. They do have the ability to pull directly from our PeopleSoft system that we already have. It's set up to do that, so we don't have to do any implementation or changes to what the software that we already utilize as our main financial software. So
Okay,
it already.
I'm always suspicious. Can you provide me an example?
So all of the accounting, the expense entries that we do for all of these SPEDA agreements, we have the ability to pull that information out of the software that we use for our financials that the entire county utilizes, and we can import that directly into DebtBook to track and make sure that all of the expenses are reconciled. And then we have the ability to take that and then do all of the accounting that's required for us for our financial statements.
So does DebtBook have computational capabilities? I would have assumed DebtBook would be the engine that would tell you what your financial obligations were based on the data you entered, and then you'd want to feed that back into PeopleSoft.
But yes, so both. So we pull, you're going to pay all of your expenses throughout the year in PeopleSoft. We're going to take that out. We're going to put it into DebtBook, calculate all of our liabilities that the county has per the agreements. And then once that's all been generated, it'll go into our financial statements, and then the journal entries will be entered back into PeopleSoft to account for all of those.
Okay, and presumably you have a schema or roadmap already laid out, so even I could go down there and implement it. Oh, okay, maybe that's stretching it.
Yeah, yes.
I'd like to add, Arn, you are right that PeopleSoft, I think where you might have been going, PeopleSoft does have a module that could perform this function for us. However, we worked with the IT and it is cost prohibitive and much more work to get launched than acquiring a separate software solution.
Yeah, that appeals to my fairly negative feeling about PeopleSoft. So I thank you, IT. I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. I understand that going ahead with this would save us some money, but I'm concerned about the security of the DebtBook. How secure is it?
So it's,
I mean, I'm sorry, this is a lot of information that you're going to be putting into the hands, whole county, a lot of information. So it needs to be very, very secure.
So DebtBook will only receive our expenses related to the software programs that we use. We won't be entering any information, so the courts are a good example if they have any software that they utilize to track court cases. None of those court cases will be entered into DebtBook. The only thing that's going to be entered into DebtBook is the cost paying for that software and the liabilities related to having that software. None of the internal information from that software will go into DebtBook.
And I would add, all of that information should be in the public domain anyhow.
Yes.
So it's protection from us getting it locked out or tampered with, but not observed.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on consent agenda? Pleasure of the board.
Don't see any comments. Ready for a motion?
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve today's consent agenda as presented.
Last chance for comments. We have a motion. Seeing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you. Motion item, Public Works.
Good morning, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. This morning, you have before you the supplement number 1 to the local agency agreement for the Eric Creek Fish Passage Project. This project is located on Abernathy Creek Road, approximately milepost 5.35, which is about a third of a mile prior to Brentwood Road, to give people context on the road. This project is funded by promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation, which is a formula program called Protect, which WashDOT manages. This project will replace a failing culvert, failing steel culvert with a large concrete box. It will open up approximately 2.3 miles of habitats to make it available for the ESA listed species of coho and steelhead and potentially cutthroat and resident trout. This project has been under design for many years. Eric Creek is a tributary to Abernathy Creek, which the surfboard, which is a salmon recovery board, has deemed an intensively monitored watershed. And they've been doing numerous projects in this watershed and monitoring fish recovery out there. So this project would help continue those efforts. The county is under design. We're at 95% design. We're in the process of obtaining the last of our right-of-way. This will obligate the $2 million required for construction, and this program is 100% reimbursable.
Okay, questions?
Do we have any blockage downstream from that?
So this culvert is the last culvert on Eric Creek. It is approximately 150 feet before the confluence with Abernathy Creek, and it is my understanding that it is clear down Abernathy Creek to the Columbia River.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, comments? I see none. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the supplement number 1 to the local agency agreement for the Eric Creek Fish Passage Project as has been presented.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Last chance. See no hands. I would call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Another motion item, Superior Court.
There. Either one.
Yeah, that working. Okay, very good. All right, good morning, Commissioners. Gary Basher, Superior Court Judge presiding for Cowlitz County. I'm Court Administrator Danielle Paul is with me. We're here to request the court approve a resolution to support us proceeding with a sixth judge through the legislature in next session to be hopefully implemented by January of 2025. This is a process we went through at a workshop last week. We had a lot of questions. I think we answered most of those. I didn't receive any follow-up questions, but if you have any, I'd like to go ahead and address those before I make my request. Are there any specific questions that any of you have?
No, I don't.
None? No questions? Okay.
Only answers.
Okay, so, and I don't know if it was real clear the last time we were here, and a couple of things have happened since last week. The main one being, we currently employ 4 court commissioners, 1 a 3/4 time commissioner who is going to be remaining on. One of our other commissioners covers several dockets on a regular basis. That commissioner is withdrawing from that position. So we're going to probably be having to revise our schedule because the last time we reached out to the lawyers in the community and in Clark County, we got essentially 0 interest in those positions. So we're going to be decreasing our capacity somewhat because of that. That's not the issue really before the court, before you folks. So today, our request really is to remove the commissioner or the court commissioner from our budget going forward, eliminate that 3/4 time position, replace it with a full-time elected Superior Court judge who would be appointed initially and then subject to election of the citizens. That has a direct fiscal impact of a $48,000 plus, and I don't have the calculations on the benefits, but that's just the direct salary savings of $48,000 a year. So we're requesting essentially to decrease our budget by $48,000. There is, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks talking about our budget for 2024-25. That for 2025 does include a request for an additional judicial assistant. As I indicated when we were here last week, that is a position we put in to be completely transparent. We don't know if we're going to need it, but that would be addressed in the fall of next fall when we come in for the biennial adjustments. And I'm perfectly comfortable that when we come back in a couple of weeks, if you folks don't want to do anything with that position until the following fall, because we certainly don't need it at this point. So our request today really is from this board is to sign a resolution. I think you have a copy of it. I have one here if you don't. The county would be supporting the addition of a 6th judge to allow us to move forward through AOC, through the Supreme Court, and through the legislature to get that approved at the state level.
If I may, Judge, could you explain to the public the process of
Sure.
what you're trying to begin here?
I'm not an expert in legislative process, but I'll do my best. What has to happen is the local count, back up a little bit. Superior Court judges are funded half by the state and half by the county. That's not quite exactly right because the state pays all benefits, all Social Security benefits, all retirement benefits, all healthcare benefits. So that comes out of the state budget, not the county budget. So the county is responsible for 1/2 of that salary only. Our court commissioners who are working by appointment from the judges, we reach out to folks to give us some coverage when we're at conference or when we have shortages. Those are paid 100% by the county. Our 3/4 time court commissioner actually makes more than what the salary would be for a full-time Superior Court judge out of the county budget by about $48,000. The process.
Judge Basher, could you define what a court commissioner
A court commissioner is essentially, they do this almost the same thing that judges do. We appoint them and they can do anything other than a jury trial. So they cover some of our civil dockets, some of our first appearances, some of our domestic kinds of dockets. So they do everything a Superior Court judges can do except for jury trials, which is almost all of our criminal cases, which is about 75% of our caseload. So the process of getting this through is the county has to say, we'll pay our share. It goes through the Bureau of Judicial Administration, which is the state agency that oversees the courts. They then put that in their legislative request for the legislature for next session. It then is presented as a new bill next session. The legislature then has to go through their normal process, and I will tell you, I'm not 100% familiar with how everything goes through the legislature, but both houses have to approve that bill before the state then takes over their portion of it. Then it would come back to the county when we come back next fall to talk about our budget going forward in 2025. And I think that pretty well covers it. So that's the process, but we have to have this resolution from the county before we can go to the legislature. So
Questions?
I'm happy
Yeah.
to take questions from the
Yeah.
gallery if we have them. I'm happy to take questions.
Well, I'm sorry if I don't understand it totally, but before, when you had the commissioners, you had several, not just one, correct? You had several. You didn't have court commissioner, you had more than one, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and now you're wanting one judge. So in my mind, and I could be totally wrong, it sounds like you're going to be creating a bottleneck for the trials and issues that go through the courts, because where you had several people working on all of these different trials and issues going through the court, now you're going to have one person who cannot probably handle as many people as what the 3 or 2 that you had. Am I wrong?
That's actually, I probably didn't explain it very well. We have a 3/4 time court commissioner who works every week, who does protection orders, family law dockets, a number of other types of cases. That person cannot do jury trials. They can only do the kinds of cases we have them doing. They would be leaving, and we would be replacing them with a full-time Superior Court judge who can do all of that work plus jury trials, and we get 25% more time from that judge than we do from our court commissioner.
Okay, so you're talking about having the one commissioner, not several. I thought you were going to replace several people with that one judge. So I did hear wrong.
But
Thank
let me
you.
clarify, we're only replacing one court commissioner.
I see.
The other court commissioners, we still have a need for them to cover vacations or sick or whatever. They work on an on-call basis, so they're not regular county employees. They come in as we need them.
I see. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, come on up.
My name is Richard Dreyer. I'm a personal friend of Gary. I knew Gary through drug court. One of the things that I have a problem with, I was trained in experimental psychology. I'm not a clinician. I think there's a report about drug court that is about 76 pages long. It is a master of documentation. Arn and I are close friends. Arn and I had a talk just before this, and he was concerned that judges worry about their overturn rate, whether they will be overturned on the Superior Court. Just to put it simply, we all operate under a win-loss ratio. I don't give a damn whether you're a psychiatrist or a teacher or whatever. Judges have to do a lot of research to make sure that they're not being overturned. Gary, I'd like to ask you, what is the latency rate when we file a civil suit? How long is it till that civil suit is heard?
It's going to vary by the type of case. If it's a family law case, theoretically, that could be heard within several months' time, fairly quickly. They typically take longer because family law cases are usually complicated and there's a lot of stuff that the lawyers do between the start and the finish. A civil case, for instance, a civil jury trial, that would I think we're setting trials, you know where we're setting trials at, Danielle? It's at least a year out that we can actually find a spot to put those cases. Probably longer the longer the trial, the farther we have to put them out because we have to find a time when we don't have other things going.
Legal costs are expensive. Do you think that we have enough budget in the Superior Court to adequately handle all the cases before the Superior Court?
That's a dangerous question. Of course, I think we could use more funding, but we're short, according to the state workload estimates, we should have about 7 judges. We're asking for a 6th. When we got our 5th judge, we were slated to have 7. So I would say the courts generally across the state are fairly well underfunded, but that's not the issue today. Our issue today is to try and increase our capacity and save the county $50,000 a year, basically.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
So before I did want to ask you, Judge, at some point, perhaps after the question, let us know what the implication of the letter actually is. That is to say, does it provide a statement that says we, the board, are in favor of a 6th judge, or does it provide something other than we have the capacity to manage the budget? In other words, how will this be perceived outside? Do we, by approving the letter, do we tie the hands of the future commissioners?
Well, to a small degree, I would say you do, because first off, the implication of this letter is that this board is willing to cover the cost, the county cost of 1/2 of a salary for a judge going forward. When we were here last week, there was some scenarios brought up about, well, what happens if crime goes away or the population drops or people stop getting divorces or that sort of thing. I've been working in this field for 23 years, and it's been an increasing caseload since I started. So I can't predict the future, but I don't expect that with the way the situation with the society is that any of those things are likely to happen. If that were to happen, the state legislature has the ability through their process to reduce a judge in a county that, for instance, let's say Cowlitz County lost a whole bunch of population or caseload significantly dropped. They would have to wait until the end of the judicial term in order to eliminate that position, but they would have the power to do that. And the reality is they would have the incentive to do that because they're paying the other half plus all the benefits. So and I understand your position or your concern is that you vote this and then somebody can't change it in the future. I would point out that every other position we have through Superior Court is approved by this board on an annual basis, and you approve our budget. So this does add about 114,000, I think, that would be outside of your veto power on an annual basis, but everything else is still there. So does that answer the question?
The first part, this other one was an addendum, and there's stuff I would discuss there. I don't know when the proper time is for that, but
Well, let me interject, at least from my experience. When I joined this commission in 2013, the request for a 5th judge had already been approved quite some time before I took office. In fact, it was in 2008, the legislature approved that 5th. We did not actually fund that 5th position until 2015.
Correct.
So no, we're not tying the hands of future commissioners, but we are promising to consider it. And I think that's a fair, again, it all depends on, the funding at the time, which in 2008, we were going right into a recession later that year. And we had to get through that before we felt comfortable to bring about that 5th one. But at the same time, caseloads have continued to go up. So the use of commissioners has been important. The other thing that I wanted to just suggest is just to remember that in terms of a bottleneck, court commissioners' decisions are appealed to county superior court judges. So using court commissioners is a little bit more convoluted process, because if a judge is the one whose decision is being made, he doesn't get reviewed by his fellow commissioners or superior court judges. It goes to Supreme Court of Appeals.
Correct.
Okay, so this is a little bit more efficient way of using resources, and the state contributes money, which they don't right now for that position.
Yeah, there are all kinds of things to say about that. For one, just going in reverse order, can you tell us how many court commissioner rulings have been appealed?
I can't give you an actual number. We went back and took a look, and I believe, how far were we able to go back and pull that?
I don't have it here. We did provide that information to Judge Hahn, which I thought she had provided, but maybe she hasn't.
Yeah, I will use this as a little bit of an unfair statement that trying to get information is very difficult. A flowery statement like it's going to actually increase the workload on Superior Court, we might be inclined to take that at face value because potentially it is true, but the actualities may not bear that out.
Can I speak to that just briefly? I would say, and this is really working off of my experience in doing those revision hearings, I don't think that's a significant reason for this request, and that's certainly not a basis of our request. It's a factor, but it's not the basis. Most, other than criminal cases, which court commissioners don't do for the most part, most criminal cases get appealed at some level just because people have a right to appeal, and in civil cases, they don't have a right. They have to be approved for the appeal through the Court of Appeals.
I appreciate that, yeah. And still working up the tree, the official population of Cowlitz County in 2010 was 102,358. Let me just call that 102,000.
Okay.
And in 2021, it's 112,000. In that period of time, there was a 9% increase in the population. Actually, when we went from 4 Superior Court judges to 5, that was a 25% increase in something, certainly in the number of judges. And then if we go from 5 to 6, that's adding another 20%. The reason I bring this up is because we're very fond of metrics, it seems like, and I think we really want to look and see, well, let me go ahead. The system is broken, and we can be a part of the problem or part of the solution. If we continue doing the same thing that hasn't brought us desired results, then we are the problem. And I don't want to be the problem. So I need to understand what is going on in the county that says our crime rate or that which appears before the courts far exceeds the population growth. And then one of the last things you said was, or the first thing, in the judge's own words, this is sort of a promissory note. And in the commissioner's word as well, it may never be enacted. I don't know about you, but I don't make promises until I really have to, because promises are ephemeral. They're really hard to keep. So we always have the prerogative to send a letter. We could do it next year and the year after also. The only issue at stake there is the latency. And I haven't heard that being addressed. So if you need a judge today, well, we've been told we needed a judge last week or equivalently, but we have court commissioners. Thing about court commissioners, to a different type of person, it's not elected. An argument has been made in a prior meeting that election of the judges is something that puts control in the hands of the people. But you know, that's actually a sham. When you ask a judge on a campaign, the typical answer you'll get is, well, I can't really say anything because I might have to face a situation like that, and I wouldn't want to be deemed to be biased. It's in terms of what Mr. Dreyer brought up, the real test of the system isn't whether those in the system think the system is doing the proper job. It's those outside the system. Are they doing a proper job? Do they view the job as being proper? So when a judge is overturned, it typically means, or it gets into trouble, it really means that a group of their peers decided that the judge wasn't playing by the rules that they prescribed. Has nothing to do with the perception from the public of justice or legality. I think unfortunately, we don't really have a justice system. We have a legal system. And I'll go back to one other statement. I remember 2016, December, I sat in a room over there and Judge Evans made this very nice impassioned plea for a fifth judge. And out of a moment of weakness, I think Karnofsky asked me what my opinion was. I had already been elected and I was going to replace him. And I said, I think the arguments are valid arguments. Let's proceed. Since that time, I have never gotten any metric at all that says what that fifth judge did for the public. I have no data on latency. I have no data on anything that I can sink my teeth in. It's very much, it's not just the courts, but in many other agencies, it's I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. And I'm saying, okay, if you're really hungry, I'll buy you the hamburger, but I don't know that that is the case here because we have court commissioners as a recourse. In addition, we've got the issue of yes, the state pays for half the salary and all of the benefits, but that's still your tax dollars. And then a judge doesn't sit in the chambers alone. There's a judicial assistant, the clerk of the county then says, you do that, and I'm going to ask you for 2 more clerks. I don't know how valid those arguments are, but what you can hang your hat on is that it isn't just adding a 6th judge. It's all kinds of other encumbrances that come along. So it's not free. And the cost analyses are always hard to make. There was one other point. For my thinking, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is still the cost. We just continue to grow. Don't know where the feedback comes. Any engineer knows that if you have a positive feedback system, it blows up. I think we're blowing up. Someone has to put a stop to this. And I really have implored the judges before, help me figure out what is going on here. When they say, well, it's the legislature, I'm like, they have more voice than I do about trying to influence the legislature. It's really somewhat disingenuous to say we have no choice. We all have choices. We just have to be willing to step back and see, are we doing the proper job? So that's, anyhow, that's my harangue at the moment. My appreciation for indulgence.
Go ahead.
So let me follow up more succinctly on what Arn was saying. How do we, the citizens, what benefit is this additional judge to the citizens of this county so that we can support our commissioners in making that decision for the benefit of us residents of the county?
You're getting a 25, well, we have a 3/4 time person. We would be getting a full
I'm
time.
asking for results. I don't care. What results? What do we really end up
Saving,
with?
you're saving about $50,000 a year.
Okay,
That's
that's
one
good.
direct result that comes right out of your pocket. The hope is that, and let me back up just a little bit, because as part of that response, it also brings up an issue that Commissioner Mortensen just brought up. When we were approved for a 5th judge in 2000, and I believe it was 6, was when that was approved by the legislature just before the recession hit. We were slated based on just the caseloads that we carried for 7 judges. We had 4, we were approved for 5. That was filled in 2017 when Judge Cruiser came on the bench. We still had a need based on caseload of 7 judges. Okay, now we're asking for a 6th, but we still have a need for 7 judges. So the result that you're looking for, hopefully, and what I was looking for, is to be able to impact the cases that come in a more timely fashion. That's our hope. We've not been able to do that, and we're not necessarily increasing by a full person. We're increasing by a 1/4 of a person, but that person has more flexibility in that they can do criminal jury trials. They can do anything that we do, where the court commissioners are somewhat limited. So to the benefit to the county is we're chipping away at what Mr. Dreyer's comment was, is are we funded the way we should be? We probably aren't, because we should have by all the standards the state's given us, have about 7 judges to handle the caseload we have. We've got 5 right now, plus we're filling in with court commissioners. So I think, and it's kind of like, if you have it's a bad example, but if you have a drain and it's 4 inches, you need a 6-inch drain. It doesn't matter if you have a 6 1/4 inch drain, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference. You're still going to have a backup.
It depends on what we put down that drain, same way
Well,
with what we put through our court system.
If the cases come forward at the same speed, then that's what would happen. If the water comes in at the same speed. I would love to believe that crime is going to go away or divorces are going to be less or any of those. I would love to believe that. That'd be a great world, but I haven't seen that in 23 years of being on this type of position. And I've been a lawyer since 1983. Cases have continually gone up. The legislature continually complicates things with more complicated laws that make cases process slower because there's more things we have to do on every case. So an awful lot of what it
So
comes in.
you bring up a very important point, and
Mhm.
Arn and we do it. We're not seeing any improvement in the ultimate results in our society. We're seeing cases go on, and of course, you talk about the rules and regulations. And I don't find the Bar Association very proactive in supporting us as citizens. They're supporting you as lawyers in many of these cases. So I beg of you to work your Bar Association to represent the citizens more than the legal process that gets everything tangled up. So anyway, that's just a perception.
Okay, and
As a citizen paying the bill and doing it. So let me ask, evictions, which court do evictions go through?
they go through our court,
The which?
through the Superior Court.
Superior Court. Okay, so you talk about it. There is a lot of frustration right now
Mhm.
in the eviction process. Two pieces. Has the system, since it got all tangled up through COVID, are you now on a regular basis, scheduling, et cetera, and back on a regular schedule so that we can see that there is scheduling and a process going?
We've never stopped handling eviction cases as long as they were allowed by the legislature. When the legislature put the brakes on everything, we didn't have a lot of evictions going because there were only a very limited number that were allowed to proceed forward. Since that was put back into place, a couple things have happened. One, there's the eviction law. And I normally don't do that docket, that caseload, but I've done that for the last 3 weeks because our court commissioner has been out of commission for a bit. Those cases have become significantly more complex because the legislature created a labyrinth of restrictions on what has to happen in order for an eviction to proceed forward. That's the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened is there's a mandate for a right to counsel, which requires that anybody who is low income, which is a good portion of the population who come before us, are entitled to an attorney. So those cases become more complicated, and you can argue that that's slowing the process down, but it also holds the landlord bar to do the cases correctly. So it's just like, people are entitled to have some representation. If you were being evicted, you'd want a lawyer to represent you. And if you couldn't afford to hire one, because lawyers are expensive, this gives folks like that an opportunity to have an attorney. So those cases take longer than they did before. The lead time up to when they come into court is longer than it used to be. Those are statutory changes by the legislature. I know during COVID, we were mandated by the state to put in what was called ERPP, which was the Eviction Resolution Program, which required all cases to go to a mediation center before they could come to court. That was a state requirement. We implemented that locally because we were mandated to do that. That's gone away. We don't mandate anything that isn't mandated by state law. So as far as the process, we handle them. It's really frustrating for the courts as well because they're much more complicated.
Right, and that's my observation of good landlords trying to process through the system. Through COVID, we and they had tenants that just decided they didn't have to pay their rent anymore. Their income and their entitlements did not change, but they said, aha, I don't have to pay rent anymore. Many of those have $5,000 to $10,000 in late fees over the 2 years. Now we have to go to court. They have their attorney paid for. We have to hire attorneys for another $5,000 or $10,000 just to get through the process. I'm just sharing a whale of a lot of frustration from the clientele out here trying to survive, provide affordable housing, clean, safe housing, and it is jammed up with a bunch of this crap going through that sewer pipe you're saying. Okay.
So if I might interrupt you, then it is a good point to ask the judge, does that concern, how do you feel about that? Is that a realistic concern?
Right, that's a good point.
How do I feel about it? I'm sorry.
I didn't hear your response.
How do I feel about it?
Do you think he has a good?
I think it's
point?
a very legitimate point.
Okay, so then my follow-up question to you is, this is an example of where I think in your shoes, and I've got to project, I'm saying, suppose I had your shoes, I would look at that and say, this is crazy. This is just bureaucratic nonsense. Let me call the legislature, let me talk to my legislators and let them know what they're doing. Have you done that?
See, that's exactly what I'm saying. So in response to your bar association as an association for input on some of these laws in the client's favor.
Let me respond to that. First off, the courts are not part of the bar association. That's a separate entity.
But you're a
outside
bar
of us.
association. All of you attorneys have.
We are a membership of the bar association, correct?
Right.
The bar association, as well as the Superior Court Judges Association, we have folks not in the legislature, but who are advocating against a lot of these things, because things like the minor guardianship law created a nightmare for the courts to deal with. Protection order laws have become incredibly more complex. For me to handle a protection order, it's probably 2 or 3 times as much time that I have to do, which is mandated by the state. Now, going back to Commissioner Mortensen's position, we do advocate against laws when we think they're going to be a problem. We don't advocate, and this goes back to a very basic
So
constitutional
how do
principle.
you advocate? Just let me, Because I don't see, I have engineering association manuals come out about what my association is doing.
Right.
I don't see anything what the bar, your association is doing.
I don't know what the Bar Association does, but I know what the Superior Court judges do. We have
Okay.
a lobbyist who is in every session. I think we have two, actually. We have a legislative committee with the Superior Court judges. We advocate for what we believe are going to be problems, or against things that are going to be problems for us to handle, difficulties with laws, problems with laws. So we're very active in that area. I can tell you that. I mean, I don't go up there myself. I would be going up to testify on this particular bill, assuming this is approved. But for the most part, we have a legislative committee of the Superior Court judges. We have two lobbyists. One, and we've had those for years, and they're very active up there. When, for instance, the minor guardianship bill came into place, there was a real push to do that, which changed third-party custody, grandparents getting custody of their grandkids, that type of thing, turned it into a guardianship. It created just a nightmare bunch of problems because it was poorly implemented. Now, going back to a principle, and I think Commissioner Mortensen, you very strongly believe in constitutional principles. There are three branches of government. There is the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. We're part of the judicial. It's important for the system to work properly that I stay out of Commissioner Mortensen's world and he stay out of mine, because they're separation of powers. Those are basic principles that this whole country is founded on. We advocate when it comes to things that are going to be impacting the courts and the handling of cases, impacting access to justice for folks like yourself, if you're trying to evict somebody, all those things. What we can't do is I can't just say, I don't like that law, or that's a bad law, needs to go away. I can't do that. I have to have.
Maybe you won't, but some of them are. Some judges are. So anyway, we'll just go beyond that.
Actually, they don't, sir. What happens is if somebody files a case and says this is unconstitutional, or this is a problem, at which point it's ripe for me to actually make a decision about it. I can't just do it out of the air.
Right.
I have to have somebody file a case before I'm allowed to do that. So, I mean, I rule against things. I rule for things. I try and follow the law because that's what my job is. There was a question raised at our workshop last week about why we responded to COVID the way we did. And a piece of that was because Labor and Industries has certain requirements that we have to follow, or we subject your tax dollars to being paid in fines for not following those rules. If somebody files a lawsuit to challenge those rules, then we can make a decision on it. But until then, I have to follow the rules just like you do. So the courts are a separate branch of government. We don't get into the legislature's lane and tell them how to do things. We advocate for things or against things. We suggest bills to the legislature. We've done that on a number of cases. This would be a bill suggested by the Superior Court judges to add another judge. So we're involved in that sense.
Right. So let me, I'll cut it short. Just go ahead.
We're not talking a straight black line separating one side from another there in terms of constitutionality. There are some things that are pretty darn obvious to me, like I know English is not my first language, but I certainly can't find alternative interpretations to shall not be infringed, but apparently other people can. So in this particular case, the excursions of Superior Court into drug court, mental health court, and community court show that there is advocacy. And all we're asking for is not for you to go to jail. We're asking for a visible, noticeable advocacy for the people, not for the bar, let's say. And as long as I have the floor, you mentioned, are you unable at this point by law to prescribe a mediation for a tenant landlord dispute?
Could you clarify that question?
Yeah, if I came up to you complaining that this guy, my landlord, is a mean guy,
Mhm.
can you just say, look, you're wasting the people's time here. Go to mediation center, work it out, and if you can't, come back to me with a full report that tells me
Mhm.
how you failed at mediation.
First off, if there hasn't been a case filed in the court, I can't. I don't have a jurisdiction to tell you to do anything until you come to court. I do have the ability, and we have mandatory arbitration in a lot of our civil cases, as long as it's, and that under state law, we're required to have that. Any case that is purely money, you can't arbitrate other stuff in that, under that law. We have some mandatory mediation put together in some of our family law cases. So we
Okay,
can do that, but that's after the case comes to court.
Yeah, I must have misunderstood a statement you made. It sounded like the law changed and you could no longer send them to mediation under the proper situation.
Well, under the eviction process. And here's the thing that I guess where I come from on that. If the legislature, if the statute says a landlord and a tenant have to go to mediation before they can proceed to eviction, that's what the rules are. I don't have an ability, and I don't think I should have the ability to say, you can't file a case until you go to mediation. That is purely a legislative province to create those kinds of rules. So when we had those rules in place by the legislature, we followed those rules, and people had to do certain things before they could actually come to court. And we followed those rules. We don't have that now. There are some mediation pieces for certain types of evictions. And I'm not going to try and quote them because I'll get it wrong, but it's a very complicated law, which I experienced the last couple of weeks having to do that docket. So again, it used to be fairly simple. You didn't pay your rent, you got evicted. It's a lot more complicated than that now.
Okay, so just the final one, the process of selecting the judge, should that be the decision? You
Mhm.
said it'd be appointed. Who appoints that judge?
That would be a governor's appointment initially, and that's I believe that's by the Constitution, the initial appointment. That judge then has to run for retention of that office the following fall.
So,
in that
so
election.
you answered my question. That does not put me at good rest that our governor would appoint that person. Secondly, is that the election process. Let me just share on that again. We've worked really hard to try to vet the judges, and that is an extremely frustrating process because we can't hardly get any information in doing that. What's your recommendation? The
My
vetting our
recommendation-
judges based upon some law, some personal, and we ultimately getting to hopefully decide on a ballot which judge we want representing us.
Well, I think if you look at an incumbent judge, somebody who's in office currently, and I've been in a judicial position since 2011. I was actually a court commissioner for 12 years prior to that time. So I've got a long record that is public record, most
Is
all
that,
of
okay,
that.
so that record,
You can
just
go-
you for instance, is available on your decisions in court cases then?
Yeah, and
Okay.
my decisions as how they've been upheld by the Court of Appeals, that's all public record. We do nothing court-wise. It's all open court. You're allowed to come watch our court. The cases where we don't have actual courtroom going, where we've got a fully Zoom, you're allowed to watch that. We broadcast that on KLTV, so people can watch us and see what we do. We're not trying to hide anything. We really aren't.
Right. Okay, anyway, we've,
The problem with that
Well,
is though,
Let me make one more comment in response to his question. And this is, in vetting a judge, we work under a code of requirements, code of ethics that we're required to follow. I'm not allowed to tell you how I'm going to rule on a case that hasn't been presented to me. I can't have a lawyer come to me and says, Judge, this is what I think. How would you rule on this? I'm not allowed to do that. That's what's called an advisory opinion. And the reason for that, and it's an important reason, is because if you come to me and you give me 5 facts upon which I'm going to give you how I would rule, and then that case comes to me in court and there's 6 or 7 facts that I didn't know about the first time, I might have a completely different decision. So part of the reason why we don't give advisory opinions, and part of the reason I can't tell you how I'm going to rule on a particular case, is I have to wait until I see all of the evidence on a particular case. And so I can make a ruling based on the whole picture. We don't make rulings based on Facebook rumors. We don't make rulings based on,
I
you know,
don't think I-
newspaper
I don't
articles.
think I was making an
No,
assertion like
I
that.
don't, but you're asking, how do you vet a judge? And that's a common frustration, that we can't talk about how we're going to rule on things. And there's a reason for it. And it's, our code of ethics requires me not to do that. And there's a really good reason behind it, because I'm going to give you one answer on one set of facts, a different answer on another set of facts.
And I did want to agree with you on that, Judge. A priori, what you said, I agree with. A posteriori, what you said, I agree with also. The public doesn't have enough information to decide whether the rule is outrageous or not. And that's a great disadvantage. But what I do know from sitting outside is that I think I've advocated I've said the system is broken. And while I have much respect for you and the other judges, I don't have anything but good things to say there.
Appreciate that.
Collectively, we have a system that I think our only hope for the citizens to fix that is not to reelect a judge. As soon as judges start not having a career as a lifetime judge, things are going to start to change. They're going to have to ask and say, what is it that's upsetting the public? And that will work. That will work a lot of magic. That applies to all these people, as opposed to demanding term limits. Just fire the guy at the next election. And you can do that very, very nicely, very efficiently. And if there's no other opponent, well, just don't vote for him anyhow.
I would say the difference between state and federal judges is federal judges are appointed for life. We're not. We are subject to reelection every 4 years.
Oh, yeah, but I'll go back to what I said. Just because you ostensibly could be out, the record shows that that's just not the way it works. There's too much noise in the system. We've got some of the most incompetent legislatures that have been in office for a long time. And we've got judges here who, I mean, how long have you been a judge?
I was appointed in 2011.
Right, so you've been there 12 years and you probably expect, and I would expect that you'd continue. And
That's my expectation, my hope.
yeah, I can only think of one example offhand, and I don't want to mention that. And that was, anyhow, I don't want to mention that.
I don't expect everybody's going to agree with every decision I make.
Yeah, and it's not a point necessarily of agreeing with you. It's agreeing with the system.
Yep, I get it.
Yes.
I'm
Yes, sir.
just going to touch base on a couple things. Your Honor, you came here to have another appointment for another judge, correct? Instead of,
What we came here for was to have this board approve, say they would, excuse me, they would fund the salary if it's approved through the legislature.
your
Correct.
court commissioners, how many do you have right now?
We actually have four. I think we have four that we actually have. We could draw from. One who's a 3/4 time, which is the position that would be eliminated. We have three others. One is retired Judge Warning, who comes in and covers occasionally as needed. And then we have two others that
Those others, are they 3/4 also, or?
they work as needed. So if we have somebody sick and we have to cover a docket, we call somebody, say, hey, can you come in and cover this? Because it's kind of like
And-
when somebody calls in sick.
What Arnie mentioned, if you get a judge, you got support people. What about these commissioners? Do they have support people, or do you guys already have that structured in?
I'm not
To
sure I
support
understand.
them when they show up to work.
Yeah, we do. We have judicial assistants that already support the court commissioner.
So they're already on the payroll.
Except it doesn't work that way. I talked to the clerk of the county, and she's going to want more clerks, and I was told you'd want another judicial assistant.
I'm just saying, in regards to the court commissioners,
Mhm.
the ones that you have that are supporting you guys now, support those court commissioners when they come in part-time. So there wouldn't be any extra cost if you keep court commissioners. The only thing you're going to benefit in regards to a new judge is you're going to get 25% more. You're going to get jury trials by that judge. And he can handle criminal cases.
Mhm.
And so that is a benefit. You're going to save $48,000. Where do you come up with that number?
Currently, our 3/4 time court commissioner is paid roughly $160,000. That's just hourly times 3/4.
Okay,
The county portion of a judge in 2025, I believe, is 114,000 with no benefits.
with no benefits, but the benefits, the judge's benefits are paid by
By the state. And the court commissioner, like social security deductions, any kind of retirement benefits, if any, are paid through the county for a court commissioner.
Right.
All that's paid by the state for a judge. So currently, our current 3/4 time salary or commissioner is estimated at $163,100.
Mhm.
A judge for the same time period is $114,000.
So it's a savings.
It's a savings, yes,
Instead of a
$48,000
landlord
plus
tenant,
benefits.
I think we got a little bit off topic. You're not here to be drilled about landlord tenant issues and judges. This is about appointing another judge to see if we benefit from that. And according to what you're saying, we would.
That's
That's what I can understand.
that's why I'm here, sir.
About COVID and landlord issues, that's not your deal. And the bar association's the bar association. If a public person has a problem with an attorney, they can report to the bar.
Mhm.
If they got a problem with a judge, it's judicial misconduct,
Correct.
okay?
We had a judge who was removed because of misconduct.
We just need to look at cost versus benefit. And if it works, we do it.
That's,
That's all I got to say. We're wasting a lot of time.
I appreciate your comment, sir.
Again, I have to apologize because I know I don't know as much as that gentleman that just left. However, I'm going to go back to what Ron had mentioned about what the judges are doing for the people, how they view their benefits of having another judge and would that help them. Right now, if you've attended any of these BOCC meetings, especially in the past, you've heard over and over and over again that people have been arrested, they go to court, and immediately they're thrown out in the streets, no matter how bad and what their act was. Right now, the perception of the population here is that the judges are way lenient on those who are going to trial. That is one of the reasons why a lot of people are opposing what you want, is because right now we don't feel that we're getting the support from our judges against these felons. And I just want you to know this, because that is what you're fighting right now, is the perceived idea that they're just going right through the system with no problems, and they're right back on the street and committing the same or even more offensive problems. So
Let me respond to that briefly. I'll try to. The Supreme Court sets the rules for setting bail. Washington is a presumption of release state. In other words, you are presumed, if you're arrested for a crime, any crime except for capital crimes like murder or some one of those, that you'll be released when you come to court at your first appearance. And then we will move back from that. If you're a juvenile, it's almost, I was not impossible, but it's pretty darn close to impossible to hold a juvenile because of rules that have come down both from the legislature and from the Supreme Court telling us this is the rule for addressing these things. Very specific rule. I would disagree that most cases people come in and are immediately released, because I know the ones that I have been hearing, I hear first appearances, I'll be hearing them this afternoon at 1 o'clock or 1 o'clock this afternoon. I'll be in the jail. I don't know how many there are today, but I'll be hearing people coming in, and I'll make a decision what their bail or what their conditions of release are. And so I release a few people that don't have serious crimes or that aren't dangerous to the community in the sense of they're going to come out and commit a violent crime, because that's the standard that I'm required to follow. if somebody's going to go out and shoplift again, that doesn't meet the test the Supreme Court's given me.
I'm actually referring to the people that have harassed the Highland areas
Mhm.
with their drug use and other obscene behavior. And they're coming right back and
Mhm.
onto their yards, in their front yards,
Mhm.
and doing that act over and over again. They just want it stopped, and they just don't feel they're being heard. And so I just need to let you know that part of this reluctance to fund even more judges is the perception that it probably wouldn't help because nothing right now is helping these particular people. And I know it could be very wrong. I understand that, but this is what you're fighting because right now the community is seeing a lot of this activity,
Mhm.
especially now during the summer, happening in like in the Highlands, right in their yards. And like I said, it has a great impact on perception of the people toward the judges.
I think those are legitimate concerns, and I understand that frustration. I mean, I do. There's
No,
Hi, so, really quick, I want to touch on, you said that it was a $48,000 savings.
correct.
The way-
It's actually more than that, but that's the hard number
The
of the
estimate,
salary.
okay, so that 48,000 is picked up by the state then? Essentially, because they're paying for the benefits and half of the judge's salary.
It's actually a little bit different than that. The county pays all the court commissioner's
Mhm.
salary and benefits. Right now, that's 163,000 plus benefits. So that's social security deductions, health insurance,
Sure.
any of that kind of benefits. The salary for a Superior Court judge, the half that the county would pay is 114,000.
Okay,
So that's the $48,000 difference.
got it,
The state covers the other half plus all the
plus the benefits.
Correct.
So as a taxpayer, that's still my money
Mhm.
going to that, right? So really, the savings, I mean, maybe it's going to save this board that, but as a taxpayer, like me looking at it, still, I'm actually paying more into the system to have a judge versus the commissioner.
It's entirely possible that the total cost is going to be coming out of somebody's pocket.
Yeah, it's
I
coming from
totally agree.
someone.
And I'm
Okay.
not a big fan of paying lots of taxes.
Right,
So I
right, right. Yeah,
recognize that.
I get to.
I'm looking at, for this board, it's a savings to this county specifically.
Sure, sure. But as a state, looking at, we pay into the state as well.
Correct.
So another question I would have for you is you, I guess collectively as the judges, what have you done to make your job more efficient so that maybe another judge isn't needed? Like, is there a way that, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know all the intricacies, but how can we maybe cut? Do you have an average? Do you know like the average case, like how many days an average case takes, or how many judge days an average case takes? And then how could that be maybe more efficiently used? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
It does. It does. First off, every case is different.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I can't say that every divorce is
Sure.
going to take 3 hours or something like that.
Right, right. But there
it-
is an average.
There
If
is, and
you
those
looked at all of
numbers
them.
are available through the state. I don't have them here with me,
Okay,
but we
sure.
have those numbers, how long case processing takes. That's all available. What I can tell you is last year, they came out with a new rule
Mhm.
called an informal family law trial. And what it allows is folks who have lawyers or not come in, and the presentation of their case is very simple. There's no court rules. The judge asks
Sure.
questions. So it shortens up the court time pretty significantly. We just did one of those. Judge Evans did that. He spent, I think, half a day or maybe a day listening to all this. And then he spent 3 days in his office trying to go plow through all the material. So it's not
Sure,
a
sure.
savings
Yeah.
to the system.
Oh, I
It makes it
see.
easier for the person coming in, but it doesn't save the
Right.
system time. So one of the questions that's always come up is, well, you have an empty courtroom today. And that's true. And Commissioner Mortensen several years ago came to me and he says, why don't you oversell the courtrooms like the airplanes do? So we started doing that. We stack up probably 3,
Sure.
sometimes 4 trials
Mhm.
for every day that we have trial days. And some days, because of that, all of those go away, because that's how cases settle, is on the courthouse steps. That's typically when
Sure,
most
sure.
cases settle.
Yeah.
historically, in this county, around 3 or 3.5% of all, and maybe it's 3.5 to 4% of all cases filed go to trial. And that's pretty consistent nationwide. That's just how the system
Sure.
works. And that's
Yeah.
data that we've collected for years. To make it more efficient, one of the things we're doing right now is we're working with the National Center for State Courts. We got a grant through them to come in, look at how we process our criminal cases, to come up with some suggestions and
Sure.
guidance.
Sure.
Clark County just did that a year ago. So we're doing that to try and become more
So
efficient.
is that a new, that's a new thing? That's a new grant that's just started
Correct.
now?
That started last September.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so
I think
you're,
it was
you're a year into it or so?
Yeah, we've met with them and they're working on recommendations
Okay.
to provide to us now.
And so we, it's, again, if I had all the time in the world and I didn't have to go to court, I could go and study more about case processing.
If we all
case
had all the
management
time in
and
the
all
world,
that
right?
stuff.
Yeah.
There are ways to improve the system, but the reality honestly is that there's this much of a caseload
Mhm.
and there's this big of a pipe for it to go through. And so we try and be as efficient as we can.
Sure, sure.
The flip side of that, and I think this is a really important thing, and I told the folks who came out to analyze our system, I do not have any inclination or desire to make courts efficient at the cost of handling cases the
Oh,
way they should be
absolutely.
handled.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest
And
that.
so I'm not going to go to a situation where we're putting everybody in the mill and just cranking them through.
Right,
Because
right.
every case is different. And everyone, I won't say everyone, most people, they say, well, the court's doing this or not doing that. Or they complain about this or complain about that. And then when their case comes into court, the story changes
They
dramatically.
get it a little differently. Yeah.
Everybody wants to have their case be the most important case. And it is the most important case to you
Sure.
at that moment in time. And that's the
Sure.
way I try to handle those cases. I think the other
Right.
judges do too.
Right.
So we do work towards efficiency. We do try and process as many cases as we can. There are some other limits in the system, and that is we have a limited number of prosecutors and public defenders.
Sure.
We have a limited amount of courtroom space. So on any given day, we can only have so many things happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, I get there's a lot of variables. I guess like from my perspective, what I'm looking at, I work in healthcare.
Mhm.
So in the 90s, hospitals were saying we need X number of days for a certain type of patient to
Mhm.
make it through. So at that time, Medicare put in what are called DRGs, diagnostic related groups, and they essentially said, for a total hip replacement, we took the average of every single total hip replacement, and we're going to pay you for 4 days. I'm simplifying the system, but we're going to pay you for 4 days. It doesn't matter if they stay there for 1 day or they stay there for 10 days. We're going to pay you for 4 days. So that really forced hospitals to be more efficient because now the purse strings are tied.
Mhm.
So as an outsider, not knowing the court system and things, that feels a little bit like where we're at now. You're having that consultant come in, and I would love for that to be come to fruition before this were passed for another judge. But forcing those purse strings to be tied a little bit, is that going to force you guys to find new ways to be efficient? Because that's essentially what it did in healthcare, and there's ups and downs to that, and we could parse that out. But just as somebody sitting and listening like that, feels a little bit like where it's at for me. Like would tightening those purse strings force you to be more efficient somehow? And I don't know what that somehow is, but maybe that consultant could help with that. So that's just, I would love for that consultant to be able to have their ideas implemented before we did another judge. So.
Thank you.
Really didn't want to come up here, but what I see the benefit of having another judge,
Yeah, talking Mike.
where I see a benefit of having another judge. And it's for also the client or the person that's being represented by the court system is when you have a court commissioner that can't do a jury trial, then this other judge that is a judge has to take it over and read through everything
Mhm.
to start over. And that's a cost, a major cost. And it's a major cost to, if he misses something or didn't hear the case to begin with, I think it's not a good representation for the person that's in the courtroom. And it's another waste. Now, these court commissioners that you have,
Mhm.
that are not 3/4,
Correct.
if they're called in, do they draw a certain amount? What's the money they draw?
They get an hourly paycheck for
Okay.
whatever time they're working.
Okay, so there's a certain amount that they get, and then when they leave, the money's gone.
Correct. Yeah, we hire them as needed. It's just like if you called in a temp person or you got somebody out sick, you call in a temp to fill in that position. It's the same. That's how the cost is handled.
What is your thought? And I know you can't, there's certain questions you can answer just from
Mhm.
people because of your position.
Right.
What is your thought on what I mentioned about a person that files a court case and civil or criminal,
Mhm.
say it's a criminal deal? Would you want, if you were in that situation, would you want it transferred to another judge after this other judge has heard it all?
I think I can repeat his question. If you file a case and you come in and a court commissioner hears your case,
Correct.
makes a decision, and then do you want to have your case then transferred to a judge to rehear the case, not based on a new presentation, but based on what's already been presented?
Correct.
Accurate. I can tell you, and we did have a letter that was provided to the commissioners from the law firm, Wallstead Merching. And one of the issues I think that talks about that is that court commissioners, and we try and pick very qualified people to do those jobs. There are court commissioners who are full-time positions in some counties, Pierce County, for instance, they have a couple of court commissioners who I think are absolutely amazing as to their qualifications, but they have been doing that job for 20 years. And so
Right.
they've learned how to do that job really well. When you have people that come in on an intermittent basis, they're not necessarily at the same level as those folks. And that doesn't mean to say they don't make good decisions, because we wouldn't have them if we didn't think they were. Most of the revisions, the appeals that we get from our court commissioners that I've done, I think I've maybe reversed a couple of them out of
Right.
maybe 10 or 12. It's not a huge amount. Most of the time they get it right. Most of the time, I think the judges get it right. Court of Appeals doesn't always agree with us, but that's another story. But I think the idea that you're bringing your case, the most important case on the planet, to you, you're coming to court, and you know there's elected judges who you or somebody's elected to hear your case, and you're going to go in front of a court commissioner. That's not always people's preference, and we get complaints quite a bit of the time.
Right.
So
What do you think the time loss is in regards to if a court commissioner has to go to a jury trial and then transfer to a judge? How much more time?
well, the court commissioner cases would never be a jury case
Correct.
because they can't, and they
can't.
couldn't go through that and then go to a jury.
So it would have to come forth to you.
It would come to me or one of the other judges based on the record from the hearing that they did.
Okay.
So, which means if it was a 3-day trial, I get to go listen to 3 days worth of testimony off of the audio record, review however many pages of exhibits and documents are in the file, and then see if I agree or disagree.
Correct. And if you had a judge reviewing it from day one, you wouldn't have that expense.
That is correct. And again, that's not the biggest piece of all this. That's a small percent. And I mean, it's important, but it's not the reason for what we're trying to do this. The reason for this is we're going to gain another quarter person for less money
Correct.
who can do more stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and free up time of other.
Correct. Thank you.
So
We have another comment here.
Yeah, okay. We really must be very careful about any suggestion that we're going to impugn the court commissioner's competency. The reflection there is awful on everybody, so.
I think we have good court commissioners.
I beg your pardon?
I think we have very good court commissioners. We
Thank you, I
interview-
appreciate that. I
interview
just didn't
some-
want any misunderstanding out there on that. The next thing is, we can sit here and parse everything down to the straw or down to a fractal. In 2016, the last time we had only 4 Superior Court judges, our budget was for Superior Court was $1.2 million. 2017 was going to be a transition year or something, so I went to 2018. That was $1.5 million the Superior Court costs. Now, I don't know what all changed in there, and I probably lumped a bunch of things in there. But I want to tell you, time and time again, I think invariably we're faced, or I've been faced here with departments or agencies saying, if you'll only do this, think of the money you will save. It's never materialized, not in my existence here. It's just good intentions, and you know what they say about good intentions.
I would just totally agree. We've got a system that's broke. And someplace along the line, we have to put our foot down and say enough's enough. You know, I've looked in my business for the most part is banking. It was my career. And we went from, I remember doing a deed of trust for a loan on a house, and it was 1 page. You know, now it's 15, 18 pages because we continue to allow that legislative branch to put rules and regulations and complicating the system because someone is pushing that. And who is pushing that? I think it's attorneys. I think they're pushing that to cover this and cover that, and all they've done is complicate it. If a renter is not paying rent, they shouldn't be allowed to stay there. They're not justified because they don't like the landlord or because the landlord's doing this or doing that, unless it's something that the landlord is doing that's criminal or something that's totally out of whack there, then they have a right to have their own lawsuit. But we don't have to complicate the fact that they shouldn't be allowed to stay there, not paying rent as an example, or anything else. I don't know how we get back and how we take back control of what's going on around us. It's just gotten, the judges should be a separate branch of the government, yet they're so zeroed in on those regulations that are coming down from Olympia that says we've got to now follow this and this and this and this. Where do we ever get back to a judge being able to make a judgment between just right and wrong and standing up for that? And yes, maybe it gets appealed, and yes, maybe it has to go to the Supreme Court. But look, in our federal government, we're finally getting some of those cases coming back up to the federal court that's saying that was never right in the first place. You know, we've got to somehow take control of the fact that there is a reason why we have separations and 3 branches of government. And I don't know what the answer is here. I don't have enough information to say whether this is a good thing to add another judge or not. I totally agree with it. You say those perceived savings all of a sudden go away with something happened there. We've added more people, or, you know, we've got, I don't know. It's a hard thing that you guys have to do because I don't really have an opinion as to what would be best for that, but I just want to go on record saying somehow we've got to get back to just a simple right and wrong and have people with integrity enough to stand up for whatever consequences they may face and be able to say that is not right. That is not right, you know, and anyhow, thanks.
Any other public comment? I'll have a couple comments and then we'll see what the board wants to do. One's just a clarification. We've heard a lot about, you know, this per state metrics that we should have 7 judges. I want you to know that if you look at every county in this state, and there's 38 of them, we're no different than any other county. They're all over the board. Some counties, I think there's one county that uses up to 9 court commissioners. There's counties that use 1 or none. So it's what I'm trying to convey to you is that we're not really different than, we're not this red thumb sticking out in the state that we're different. We're not different. It's every county deals with these type of issues and deals with that. The other notes I have down here, you know, it should be a separate, the courts, I believe in the three branches of government. They should be separate, but the fact is they're not. The governor appoints these judges, and if you think they're not political appointments, then you're fooling yourself. They are. It's the justice, and I say these things, and I worry about saying these things because I don't want to disrespect our judges. I have high regard for our people over there. I've talked with all of them and believe in all of them, but the system is broken. It's political. It's been weaponized by the legislature, and it's a political system. All you had to do is live through COVID and watch them shut down businesses, fire people, and the justice system never stood at all. It's a broken system. And adjudication is done from the legislative branch. Mr. Olson over here, I totally agree. I feel sorry for these guys. Judge Basher and Hahn and Evans and all those people should have the ability to go in there and make a solid judgment on that. And they're robbed of that ability all the time through the legislative branch. And that's wrong. It's broken. The savings, you know, if you have savings in this column and it's more in this column, when you really total up all the books, it's probably a wash. So I'm not going to put a lot into that. I don't believe, unfortunately, I don't believe we have a justice system. I think we have, as Commissioner Mortensen puts it, a legal system, and they're not the same. I think the system is stacked against the citizens. It doesn't work for the citizens. And once again, I'm not blaming our local people. I think it comes through the legislative side. But I got to be honest with you, from a moral issue, I don't think I can support this. So with that said, I would leave it to you guys.
Well, this has been a great discussion on the problems of our judicial system. One of the things we do know is that the experts who are in a position to make the determination say that we have the level of activity that entitles us to more than the number of judges that we currently have. We have commissioners that cost our budget 100% of the amount. We've had the numbers where we have a 3/4 time commissioner who can't do everything the judge has, who the request is to replace with a judge that the state will support us in doing that as we reach our goal. Whether we call it a legal system or a justice system, it's no different. And we're supposed to be pursuing justice as best we can. The problems that we're having is because we're consistently underjudged. And, you know, we have to be able to afford it. But the bottom line for me, and I've said it before, and I will try to avoid flowery statements. It's the people who don't have jury trials that suffer the injustices of court cases that go on and on and on without resolution. I had somebody come up to me and said, I'm in this horrible, horrible divorce. We're trying to get it resolved, but it keeps getting pushed back. We've been waiting 2 years. Now, that's not a just system. Those kinds of family law cases need to be resolved in a much more efficient manner. I think the case has been made very well that a 6th judge ought to be in our future. The request is not for tomorrow to have a sixth judge. It's not even for tomorrow to have, or for next year to have a sixth judge. It's for 2025. And Governor Inslee is not going to be the one making that appointment. He's going out of office. So if it's an anti-Inslee thing that is part of your judgment, yeah, change your thinking on that. In the meantime, we've got families that continue to have their cases put behind. The eviction notices, that's another one of those kinds of cases. They get dealt with as they schedule it. And we've heard a lot of complaints about a system being broken. A sixth judge is part of a solution. There are certainly other rules and regulations that we need to adopt to make it ever more efficient. But I think this is just good planning for the future, something that's going to be important. It's only going to get worse if we don't make any other changes. I welcome the opportunity to have more mediation. I think this commission has gone on record of being very supportive of mediation as an additional tool to try to establish justice for more of our citizens. So I think it's timely. It's a good plan for the future. It's not going to have something that is going to add costs to our budget, but is something that will help us do a better job of establishing a more just system. So I would make the motion that we join the Supreme Court judges in requesting a sixth judge to be authorized by the legislature commencing in January of 2025.
Okay. We have a motion. Any other comments, questions?
Just a quick, Commissioner Weber, you said Supreme Court, you mean Superior Court?
Superior Court, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, just for me, if I hear like it's a savings, but the money's coming from a different taxpayer, it's not a savings in my book. So for me, the savings means nothing because it's not a savings. We're paying more, and then we'll likely be paying for assistance, I assume. It does sound like most of our court cases do not go to jury trial, so it's a very small fraction. So if you guys don't support this and pass it, I would be supportive of whatever it takes of more commissioners or more maybe better pay for them, something along those lines too. Because I'm assuming that the backlog is the backlog jury cases, or is it just like the mass of everything else mainly?
It's across the board.
Across the board.
The family law cases, the civil cases stack up behind criminal cases because by constitutional mandates, all the criminal cases go ahead of everybody. There's a few cases that they don't, but for the most part, that's the rule. So when we have a very large mass of criminal cases pending, those get first hearing, which and then trickles down. And the one comment I'll make in response to the court commissioner, as I indicated earlier, the one person that we have who's our kind of we have a 3/4 timer, we have another one who does a couple of regular dockets. That commissioner is no longer going to be doing that after October 1. We don't have any other court commissioners currently that are going to be able to step into that role. So what that really means, unless I can find somebody from Clark County to come up and do it, we will be adjusting our dockets and decreasing court time. So
Yeah.
there's a direct impact by not doing this.
And it sounds like you are struggling to get anybody to want to, because isn't it like a bunch of classes and training to be a court commissioner?
They do go through a judicial college if they're a regular court commissioner, and all of our court commissioners have done that.
And you do struggle to find new ones.
It's just finding people. We can't hire judicial assistants. We're two people down in our administrative staffing. I didn't have a problem until yesterday on court commissioners because we had them all sort of there. The OPD can't hire lawyers. The prosecutor's office can't hire lawyers. I mean, that's a problem everywhere, not just with the courts. But the court commissioner piece is, it's not just, I'm not going to bring somebody in who just passed the bar associate bar. I want somebody with experience.
Yeah.
Who is capable of doing those jobs. It takes about 5 years to be reasonably competent at this job, which is part of the reason why judges tend to stay in a while, because the first 5 years you're trying to figure it out. And I've worked harder as a judge than I ever worked as a lawyer. I can tell you that. I research more, spend more time, because I've got a different role in the system. So if I could hire court commissioners, I mean, it costs the county more money, but I don't have them. And then we also don't have the authorization to go beyond the 1 3/4 time person. We can fill in, but I don't have that authority at this point.
Does our county not pay court commissioners well, or do other counties pay more? Or is it all counties kind of suffer under the lack of staffing?
It's pretty comparable. It's about 80% of a judge's salary is what the base rate is. I think there are some that pay maybe as high as 90. There's some pay a little less, but we're right in the mix as far as the pay rate.
So other counties are probably the same exact boat, just suffering for commissioners and judicial assistants and.
Lewis County is looking, they're not able to find somebody. And again, part of the problem is when you hire a part-time court commissioner, they're also a part-time lawyer. They have a private practice. And when they're doing that, part of the reason why this commissioner decided to step back is he's too busy in his private practice to dedicate the time there. The other piece that comes out of using court commissioners that are not 3/4 or full time is that if I have a lawyer who does evictions as their primary case, I can't have them hear eviction dockets because there's some ethical rules that we have to follow in that sense.
Right.
So that creates some challenges. We have more conflicts because they have ongoing cases. Whereas the one court commissioner that we're 3/4 time is from Clark County, actually doesn't practice here, hasn't practiced here for a number of years, so doesn't have those same conflicts. So that she's been able to not have as many issues. When she has a conflict, we have to have someone else hear the case, whether it's a judge or another court commissioner.
And so the current commissioners we have, are they all Cowlitz County residents?
There's 3 that are, 1 that is Clark County.
Clark County.
Our main one is Clark County.
And then if the additional judge got added, I learned from you that Superior Court judges he could be from any county, he or she could be from any county in the state to be appointed.
Arguably, that's true.
Yeah.
I think as a practical matter, if you tried to run to keep the seat in Cowlitz County and you didn't live in Cowlitz County, I think that'd be a tough political race.
I agree. I was just thinking of the initial appointment.
The initial appointment can come from another county.
Yeah.
It's there, and that was established probably 15 years ago with a case out of Pierce in Thurston County, one of the judges up there. Generally speaking, every judge who has run for office here or been appointed to office here has been from Cowlitz County. I wouldn't expect that to change, although we have a very limited number of lawyers in this county. I mean, that may not seem like it to everybody out there, but we've decreased the number of lawyers. Most of the ones for my age apparently are retiring. So
Weird.
It's weird how that happens. And we don't have a lot of new ones coming in. So it's hard to find lawyers to hire OPD, public defenders. They're having trouble keeping or filling their staffing. The prosecutor's office has difficulty hiring. So
And we're currently down to assistants, you said?
we're down a receptionist and a judicial assistant.
Okay.
And I think we have a receptionist that we're maybe this close to hiring, but it's been about, how many months have we tried to do that?
To fill staffing, it's been over 6 months. We've been
Yeah.
trying to fill positions.
So that probably just adds to the backlog.
It adds to it adds to the stress level. And I'm not sure that contributes to backlog, but it certainly adds to my staff's mental health. And that's no comments negative in any way, but I got a bunch of staffers they're running around all the time just trying to stay on top of stuff. That's not related to the judges necessarily, although some of it is.
Right. Working them too hard, right? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. The other comment I would make, Commissioner, is that if the feeling right now is that this commission needs more information. I would ask for you to defer any kind of a vote. If you think you've got everything you need to know, then I'm fine. But if you need more information, we're happy to provide that.
Any other comments? We do have a motion on the floor, so we'll take that.
Okay.
Okay, seeing none, I would call for the vote. Those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Right.
Thank you for the time today.
All right. Thank you.
It's a great conversation. Appreciate it. We don't have any, well, before I open it up to public comment, I'll just update you on a couple of things. There's no 1:30 meeting today. And tomorrow, there's no, well, tomorrow would have been a 5:30 PM meeting. There's no meeting tomorrow. Upcoming meetings on the 20th, we have affordable housing presentation. That basically that's going to be Habitat for Humanity is going to come in and we're going to chat with them. And Community House on Broadway is going to be in and kind of give us an update on their shelter, youth shelter. Then on the 27th, the next couple of weeks, we're going through a lot of budget stuff with departments. And then on the 27th, there'll be a budget workshop. So any of you numbers folks that like to see all that, that's coming up on the 27th. Anything else anybody want to add before I open this up? Okay. It's all yours.
That was interesting to say the very least. Good morning. My name is Jim Hill, 1100 North 22nd Avenue, Kelso, Washington. Also a resident, obviously, of Cowlitz County. I'm going to actually continue the discussion that we just had. And that's not the reason I'm here, but I just came off serving 2 years on the Western District Federal Grand Jury in Seattle, 2 years. When I was drafted to serve in the Army, I served 2 years. I'm not sure which experience has been the worst, quite frankly. But sitting on a jury, a federal grand jury, a lot of the cases that we heard had to do with drugs. Preponderance, both international cases were brought before us, as well as issues in terms of distribution interstate, et cetera, et cetera. And we heard from a lot of experts about the drug problems in this, in the United States. We heard from DOH, HSI, FBI. We heard from interstate commerce people, CDC. Anybody that has any expertise or is responsible for enforcing drug laws or protecting the country against importation and distribution of drugs within the United States, we heard from. For 2 years service, this is what they give you. Not even a lousy t-shirt or baseball cap. The frustration on hearing everything that we heard about drugs as it pertains to this county, my community, is this. The problem's not going to go away. It's growing. And I don't think that there is sufficient collection of data about what really is occurring in a centralized way. And that's why I'm before a commission today. I would like to get data from all of our agencies, law enforcement, first responders, the jail especially, on what we're seeing in terms of the growth of the drug industry within our county. And I specifically want to concentrate on things involving youth and what is happening within folks 18 and under. Frankly, believe it or not, I've heard stories of how sophisticated the marketing effort is. Totally directed to creating another generation of drug addicted folks in our country. It's incredible. The level of sophistication of these folks that are importing products here, it's remarkable. where the precursor chemicals come from, or it's a worldwide industry. It's well organized, it's financed. There's a lot of science involved in the creation of these drugs in terms of the mechanization of the processing of these drugs. Incredible sourcing of equipment that's as sophisticated as anything you'll find in any worldwide known pharmaceutical company. The methods of importation, like I don't want to beat this drum too hard. I don't know if you saw in today's daily news or not, and this was just coincidental because of my concerns over how drugs are being so effectively marketed to our young people. The Chehalis Juvenile Detention Center has been under investigation. Those are 18 and under kids up there for some time, and charges are being levied distribution of fentanyl within that institution to minors. To minors. That's an institution. They have walls, guards, you name it, to prevent that sort of thing happening. Our schools and our streets do not have the same barriers, gentlemen. The kids are at risk. One of the things that I took away from all the service that I did on that federal grand jury was this. The drug problem is here, it's growing, it's highly sophisticated, and there's lots of organizations that are trying to address the problem. But I want to narrow the discussion down to just one simple thing that this commission can do in addition to collecting the data so that we can really draw all of the experiences our departments have and our law enforcement, all those people, determine some numbers in terms of how many youth those folks encounter and enter into the legal system or some sort of treatment system. And I know therapeutic courts is a touchy subject, so I won't approach that. But one of the things I came away with was remarkable testimony by some folks that said, you know what, we can't do a whole lot, but one thing we can do is make a simple treatment for opioid and pseudo opioid and synthetic opioid overdose available on the street level, and that's Narcan. I'm not trying to solve the world's problems by saying that we need to make to all the agencies and the folks that deal with opioid users on the street level, but Narcan can save lives. It's a little expensive, as I found out recently. But the fact of the matter is there's two sources of Narcan in this county. One is a visible source and one is an invisible source. Kids aren't going to go to visible sources if they're addicted. Friends tell them, you know what, if you're going to use that stuff, you better have Narcan available because you can't trust the quality of the product that you think you're buying, and it'll kill you. And it'll kill you fast. So kids are becoming aware of the value of having accessible Narcan. A couple of $1,000s from this county distributed through the health department to all these visible and invisible folks to have that Narcan available is going to save lives. 45 and 50-year-olds, you know, they know what they're doing. I'm worried about the kids. Please consider it. We're talking a couple of $1,000 here. Nobody wants to spend money. Ask the cops, ask your sheriff, ask Gina, go to the jail and ask them what the percentage of people coming in, why they're coming in, being drug related. And guess what? I looked at the state of Washington's own website about the numbers of opioid deaths. And the graph goes this way. I tried to pull up Cowlitz County's records when it pertains to opioid overdose, other Medicaid, you know, taking drugs. I couldn't find it. The last data I could find was 215, gentlemen. That's why I say I would like to see you folks pull that information together, make it public. Consider what Narcan can do. I appreciate your time. Any questions?
Jim, thanks for the information. However, does KPD have Narcan?
Yes, sir. Every one of our vehicles
I-
has it.
My understanding is all of our law enforcement has Narcan.
Everyone.
So the only other area with a large concentration of kids would be the public schools. Are you suggesting Narcan in the schools?
I have not talked to Mrs. Tack about that, but what I want to express is that it's not those entities that I'm concerned about. It's the different volunteer organizations and NGOs out there that work on the street level that aren't supported. They're mostly volunteers that make, let's face it, we know they make clean needles available and those sorts of things. Kids won't go through traditional institutions, folks. It's that simple. But there are invisible sources out there working the street every single day that don't have the Narcan available to distribute to those kids. And those kids are going to use these drugs because they're being marketed to in an incredible way. And it's happening. We see it now. The thing that we don't have is the data to back up the supposition that the problem is increasing within our youth. That's what I'm asking you to collect. And then I'm asking you, based on that data and conversations with the health department and other folks, whether it makes sense to have that Narcan available through other outlets, perhaps let's call them non-traditional outlets, so that our youth can access that and be willing to access that rather than to spend their life.
So in terms of statistics, one source that could be helpful in looking at trend lines is certainly the county coroner. And she's reported to us, there's been an uptick in fentanyl related deaths. Just within a couple of months ago. So, I mean, it's those who passed away, of course, but that should be a reflection of the.
Well, the Narcan
trends.
program would be one to try to reduce those numbers, but it's not just the contact in the coroner's office once these folks have died. It's how many people are officers coming in contact with 18 and younger. I'd like to see the information on that. Because, you know, anybody over 20 years of age that are on fentanyl or some of these other opioids, I'm not sure we can ever bring them back. But we got to try to stop a new generation from becoming addicted, and we got to stop these kids from getting killed.
By the way, I found the report interesting, and yeah, I think we're largely on the same page. I've got lots of other questions in my mind about there are always unintended consequences. You mean you can get condoms in the school? Oh, does that mean I can do all these things that I had only dreamt about? You know, Narcan's there. I'm not too concerned about it now. Hey, if I'm starting to nod out too badly, just shoot me up or spray me. I'm not using that as any argument for any one thing. I'm just saying it just isn't completely clear what should be done, although the sentiment is clear, and I agree with that. Several years ago, I was talking, I think, to the director of our jail, and I think the numbers are north of 75% of stuff that appears before the judges or end up in jail is tied in some form or another to drugs. And I talked to a DEA agent long ago, and she said the problem will never go away because everybody along the way makes money off of it.
Everyone, including
the pharmaceutical companies, yeah.
To say the very least. Narcan is not a total solution by any means, but the fact of the matter is, if you go and talk to the organization on, for instance, Kelso High School's campus, that works with the kids on campus, trying to deter them from entering the drug world, or if they're in the drug world, to help them find help. It's called Highlander Hope. And if you want to hear an interesting presentation, and I realize that we've got Epic and Longview we've got another organization in Castle. But if you want to hear an interesting presentation of all what kids are trying to do themselves, bring in Highlander Hope and those folks that are working in the deterrence programs, not only in Cowlitz County, but also in Clark County. It's quite a well-organized organization and group.
If you
Those
let,
kids themselves that are in the effort to try to prevent people from getting into the drugs, or if they're running to get them out, you know what? Some of them are 18 and maybe they could hand out Narcan at the school level.
if you let me inject a little bit of strange optimism here, drugs in the street are plenty easily available, in the schools even, right? So the real interesting question is, why aren't we all addicts? And the answer is very few of us become addicts because there is still a sense of responsibility out there. We have to figure out how to enhance that sense of responsibility. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a great success story there. But in the meantime, you don't want to let the 15-year-old die because he got a hold of something that was fentanyl too much.
When I was working with CASA, I worked with kids that were third generation in a household of drug users. In other words, father and grandfather. The lady that founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving was arrested later on for, guess what? DUI.
Of course. I mean, it's the concept, and we typically make a mistake when we turn people into heroes when it's really the thought behind them that
pharmaceuticals and the use of it are as old as mankind itself, and so that's not going to change. All I'm saying is maybe we can save one life.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
A quick note of appreciation going back to, as an example, item number 1 on the agenda today of accountability, responsibility, and professionalism in tracking costs, tracking business, tracking programs. That is within your purview and with our support in doing that. So a good thank you on that. Unfortunately, the hypocrisy across our country is terrible. We can talk about $50,000 here, and yet our government can send $1 billion to Ukraine, not caring about not war, but they don't even know where in the heck it goes of the 100 billion that we've sent. So some way or another, we got to continue to send the message that we have expectations that that billion is 1,000 millions that we need people that are willing to track and be responsible for and accountable for. Thank you.
Well, I figured I'd come up here. I'm in here in behalf of when I was here a couple months ago in regards to Paradise Cove RV Park and the closeness of these units together, creating a fire hazard. I was wondering if you guys had any resolve to any of this, and maybe I'll direct my question to Rick Dahl. Has anybody been out there and looked at these units that are close? And I know I provided all you folks an email with pictures. And you, Mr. Dahl, said that you were out there and didn't see any of this closeness, but since I sent you those pictures, has anything changed?
I don't know if the fire marshal's been out there or not. You'd have to check with building and planning. We referred it to them.
Did you all get the pictures that I sent?
I got your pictures, but those you put in there awnings and tip outs and stuff. I said units. It wasn't apples to apples, but anyway, I get you. We get your point, and yeah, we referred it to building and planning, and they're handling it.
So they are handling it. Okay, that's all I need to know.
Any other public? Thank you.
Oh, you've got a hand up.
Tracy. Okay, Tracy, go ahead. Is she on there?
There we go.
Hey, I'm here now. I couldn't get switched over. I was a
Okay.
observer. The fire marshal was out there yesterday with Cowlitz
Okay.
too. And we asked them to clear some higher brush around a couple of the trailers. One of the trailers, excuse me, needed moved. And all of that has been done. The park has been more than willing to do anything we've asked. And we have an email from the fire marshal that says they have fulfilled all the requirements set forth in the letter, the previous letter, and as far as we know, the case is closed.
Okay.
A quick question, Tracy, how long ago was that action taken?
Dustin from Cowlitz 2 was out there yesterday, and we gave them 90 days to comply, and they did it within about 35.
Within about what?
35 days.
Okay, so this is it a month that this has been fixed?
Yes. Within this last month, yes.
Okay, so the gentleman who just spoke should have known that, right?
And
Since
he should
lives
have
there?
seen, if he was there yesterday, he should have seen Cowlitz 2 out there
Okay.
doing their inspections. Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tracy. Any other questions from the public? I want to thank you for attending today. I think it was good conversation. We, we're going to have differences of opinion at times, and I think that's healthy. That's fine. So just thank you for your participation. It's important that you participate. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you.
Mr. Mortensen. One thing about Vietnam, it leaves lasting memories. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kelly Dombrowski, Clerk of the Board, and I will be doing a bid opening for the install upgrade curve warning signs project. Currently, I have 6 bids to open up. We'll start with the first one. This is from All Stripes LLC. And the total cost to Cowlitz County is $486,700. Next bid. This is from KT Contracting Company Incorporated. Total cost to Cowlitz County is $854,991.10. Next bid. This bid is from Knife River Corporation Northwest. Total cost to Cowlitz County is $820,000. Next bid. This bid is from Construction Ahead Incorporating, doing business as Pavement Surface Control. Total amount is $1,100,246.70. Next bid. This bid is from Elite Contracting Company Incorporated. Total cost to Cowlitz County is $529,096.31. And the last bid. This bid is from Clark and Sons Excavating Inc. Total amount is $504,449. The original bids will be submitted to the Public Works Department for sufficiency and responsiveness. Thank you very much.